Welcome back to another week of Behind the Lens. I'm Debbie Elias, film critic, creator, and host of Behind the Lens, where we go behind the lens and below the line with all those movers and shakers, those film and TV makers, the producers, directors, writers, actors, cinematographers, production designers, costume designers, film editors, sound mixers, VFX gurus, composers, stunt coordinators, you name it, and we talk to them. And you all know how much I love to talk, especially about film. This week we've got a lot of laughs for you, thanks to director, writer, and producer Greg Porper, and his co-director, co-writer, and editor JON Schimke, who talk about their new and often side-splitting comedy that opens this Friday, Don't Tell Larry. And who doesn't love musical theater, especially fresh off last weekend's exhilarating Tony Awards? In that vein, also on hand talking about their new film and first collaboration, Everything's Going to Be Great, are two filmmakers whose work I have long admired, director JON S. BAIRD and writer-producer STEVEN ROGERS. So let's kick things off with my exclusive interview with JON S. BAIRD and his partner in crime for Everything's Going to Be Great, writer STEVEN ROGERS. I had the pleasure and privilege of speaking with John several years ago about his delightful film STAN Ollie. And prior to that, FILTH. John is a gifted and thoughtful director who brings his light touch to Everything's Going to Be Great. And STEVEN ROGERS, well, you all know some of his films. I, TONYA, The Wonderful Hope Floats with Sandra Bullock, Harry Connick Jr., and Jenna Rollins. STEPMOM, and he's the man who came up with the story for KATE LEOPOLD, starring Hugh Jackman and Meg Ryan. Everything's Going to Be Great is a love letter to the theater and everyone who has ever had a dream. A dramedy at heart, as we hear the rousing opening strains of There's No Business Like Show Business. Sadly, it's not Ethel Merman's version, because apparently Ethel is still in really great demand, and it's very pricey to get the rights to use her songs. But as we hear another version, a cover version that is excellent, we meet the Smart family, led by Buddy and Macy Smart. Theirs is an unpredictable life of regional theater while trying to raise their sons, Lester and Derek. Lester dreams of nothing but a future in the theater. And dare I say, his dreams also include conversations with Tallulah Bankhead, Noel Coward, and Ruth Gordon. While Derek wants only to stay in one place, go to school, have friends, and play football. Often living on a shoestring, if even that, Buddy refuses to give up on his dreams for the family, while Macy has to try and keep the family together and financially afloat. This is a true journey of self-discovery while grappling with identity and belonging. Each member of the Smart family learns the power of owning the spotlight, no matter what stage of life you're in. But, as always, it's that journey that makes the destination all the richer. This is a fantastic cast, led by Bryan Cranston and Allison Janney, with a scene-stealing, show-stopping performance by Benjamin Evan Ainsworth as Lester. Jack Champion stars as Derek, and you probably know Jack from films like Scream 6, Freaky Tales, and Retribution, which he played the son of Liam Neeson's character. And Chris Cooper pops up as Macy's estranged brother Walter. Solid production values, first-rate performances, especially when Cranston and Ainsworth are together. This is a film not to be missed. So take a listen as JON S. BAIRD and STEVEN ROGERS talk about Everything's Going to Be Great. From their collaboration and the film's origins, Stephen apparently grew up in regional theater, to casting challenges, particularly for the roles of Lester and Derek, to the upbeat, positive atmosphere on set that was led by Cranston and Janney, to Rolf Kent's score, to balancing comedy and drama, to the beautiful visual style courtesy of cinematographer Mark Wolf, which grounded the film in reality while incorporating stylized elements. It's a heartfelt film. It is a beautiful film. It is a fun film. You will laugh. Your heartstrings will be tugged. You can't go wrong with Everything's Going to Be Great. Now, I apologize in advance for the brevity of the interview, and although 8 minutes was all the time allowed, the three of us crammed a lot into our conversation. So, take a listen. Well, good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Good, how are you? It's a little too early to tell for me.
You and me both. You and me both. John, it is such a joy to speak with you again. Last time we talked was for STAN Ollie.
Oh, great. Well, nice to see you again. Nice to hear you again.
Hear me? Yes. And of course, Stephen, I have admired your work for so long, so this is a real treat to not only get to speak with you about Everything's Going to Be Great, but to speak with you about this collaboration with John. What took the two of you, with your filmmaking sensibilities, so long to put your heads together to give us a film like this?
Well, I kept on asking Stephen, and he kept on saying no.
Ah.
I was going to say the same thing. No, when I saw Stan Ollie, I loved that movie, and I was like, who is this guy? And so then, once that was on my radar, I knew I wanted to work with John.
There's
For real.
Anybody that saw Stan Ollie would want to say they want to work with John, let me tell you. That's a delight.
Well, anybody who saw TONYA as well would want to work with Stephen. So there you go. I'll give you that one back.
Where did the idea for this story arise, Stephen? John, were you involved in the story process, or was this all you, Stephen, tapping that fertile mind?
All Stephen. No, it was a spec script. I wrote I, Tonya, which was a true story, and then I was only offered true stories because that's how that works.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, why don't I do one that was based on the way that I grew up? And because I hadn't really seen that before. My dad produced regional theater for a living, and I thought it was an original idea, and that made me want to pursue it.
I think it's a very original idea. That's one of the things that really impressed me when I started watching this. But as I start watching this, and it's so grounded in reality and truth, so you really brought this to life with the story, guys. But your casting is just impeccable. Watching Brian and Benjamin together is a pure joy. How difficult was it to cast these roles once you had the script, everything written, and you knew this was going into production?
That was a big gamble. I mean, I felt like we had to find, the perfect kid. And Mary Vernew was our casting person, and she put a lot of kids in front of us. And I remember the day that John sent us all an email and said, "Look at this one kid, Benjamin." And he did. He stood out from day one. And I had no idea we were going to find him so early. And then I was so afraid that he would grow. Because he was 14. And then Jack Champion, I think it was kind of the same thing for me. I was like, oh, that's Derek right there.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we were just incredibly fortunate with it. It was one of these that all came together, including Chris Cooper as well. Getting Chris to play, Walter, was another coup for us, really. And we were just incredibly fortunate to
to find the people who we hopefully deserved, you know. And I know everybody says that when they're promoting a film, oh, it was a great atmosphere, but it was the best atmosphere I've ever worked on in a film. The cast and the crew, it really was this was a very special one for me. So I'm very proud of how it's turned out.
What made this one so special for you, John?
The atmosphere on set was incredible, you know, it really was. And that starts with, if your number one in the call sheet behaves themselves in an impeccable manner and is so professional, like Alison and Brian did, then everything else just fits into place, yeah? Because then the other actors take their guide from that, yeah? You tend to find if number one's kicking off, you'll have problems with number 7 and number 12 and all the rest of them, yeah? Because they just use that. But when they see, you know, the stars of the show behaving like that, and they were a great example to the kids, you know, and how to behave and how to have a career. Well, and I used to say that to Ben and Jack. I said, look at these guys and look how they behave. This is why they've been working for so long, and this is why they work a lot, is because they turn up fully prepared with ideas, ready to learn, concentrate on the important stuff, and don't get sidetracked by the nonsense that a lot of people can do. So again, it all starts with that, and when the cast are like that, then the crew relaxes into it, and the director then, you know, has a far easier time. Mm-hmm.
Well, the one thing that caught me immediately, as soon as the first frame started, was hearing "There's no business like show business." Mm. What was it that led you? I mean, it's the perfect song to open. I do wish it had been Ethel, though. I admit.
We tried.
I'm right there with you.
Me too.
But, you know, we've got some great standout songs, needle drops in here that set the tone of things. And then you bring in one of your favorites, John. You worked with Rolf on STAN Ollie as a composer. How important was the music? Because this is musical theater.
You know, the whole... It's like anything, you know. Once you get into post, you can have ideas for music at the beginning at script stage, and I often find a lot of the time, in my experience anyway, it doesn't translate. The film somehow needs something else, but in this one, the tone was so much on a knife edge between the levity and the tragedy and the emotion and the hope and everything. So to balance that out, we got Rolf involved because we felt that he, you know, his sweet spot really is comedy and drama mixed together, and emotion and levity, and he was great with STAN Ollie with that, and he did a great job here. In terms of the needle drops, that was trial and error, really, you know, and we've got stuff from you know, show tunes to things like what was the Dire Straits one? We get the Walk of, you know, we've got Walk of Life and we've got Gordon Life. It's a eclectic sort of mix, and it's one of these things that you just, as you're in the edit and stuff, you're sampling. But it's very important for me and Stephen, I think, to have these show tunes in there, because that's what the film is all about, you know. But we tried to get Ethel, we just couldn't afford it, right?
Darn.
Is that what it was? It was.
Ethel Merman is still commanding. Amazing.
But we were using that as temp for ages, and then we just couldn't. There was some rights issue that we couldn't do it, so we re-recorded that one. But I think it still works at the beginning.
It definitely does work. And now this begs the question for me, Stephen, what led you to bring to life Tallulah Bankhead, Noel Coward, and Ruth Gordon? And by the way, Chick Reed as Ruth Gordon is fantastic.
She's amazing.
I mean, I think it's just because I used to do that. I used to have these conversations with very famous people, which sounds crazy, but, you know, I'm a writer. I live in my head, you know, and people pay me to do that. I mean, I was on the Johnny Carson show more than any guest they've ever had. You know, I had a great time in my head. I still do.
Now, I do have to ask you, John, about working with Mark Wolf, your cinematographer, and developing the visual grammar that you have. How did the two of you develop the visual tonal bandwidth and the visual grammar to root this so much in theater and in reality?
We looked at reference films, but I had just done a thing with Mark before we did this movie, a thing starring Matthew McFadden, a television thing in the UK called Stonehouse, which was based on a true story. And Mark, there's a great joke about cinematographers, yeah, and it's what's the difference between God and a cinematographer? God doesn't think he's a cinematographer. Yeah? And Mark is so the opposite of that. Yeah, Mark is the most humble, collaborative, egoless DP that you would ever, have the pleasure of working with. Yeah, and he really is the loveliest man, and his crew just adores him, and he's a very quiet, subtle guy who gets on with it, but is so prepared and brings so much to the table. So Mark turned up with a lot of different references, but he's also very much about very much about grounding it in reality as well. And we thought that was because we could have chosen. And I think myself and Stephen had a conversation about this near the beginning about how you do the ghosts, yeah, how you do the Noel Cowards and stuff. And we could have really stylized that in a way, and we did it. We really sort of, kept it in reality. So I think that really gave Mark a good guide from the very beginning, which was that's what we do with the ghosts. So everything else, you can't over-stylize anything else if the ghosts are so grounded in reality,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what we took our lead from.
Job so well done, guys. I've got a dozen other questions, but my 8 minutes is up.
Well, they were very good questions, I have to say.
Oh, John, Stephen, please do something else together. I want to see more from the two of you together. So
Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it.
have a wonderful rest of your day, guys, and looking forward to the release on the 20th.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was Jon S. BAIRD and STEVEN ROGERS talking Everything's Going to Be Great. And it is only in theaters this Friday, June 20th. See it. It will put a smile on your face and even on your heart. And score is great. There's some great needle drops. And yes, for all you theater people out there, this is custom made, tailor made for you. So check it out come Friday. So we're going to shift gears a little here. And we're moving on to Laugh Out Loud Hilarity with Don't Tell Larry, a film that I like to describe as I Love Lucy on crack. And you're going to hear my exclusive conversation with co-director, co-writers Greg Porper and John Schimke. And John also serves as the film's editor. If you haven't seen it yet, find it. It's called Somewhere in Montana. It came out earlier this year. John edited that film also. It is a beautiful film. Really beautiful. I thoroughly enjoy it, and if you can find it, and I don't know if it's on digital yet. I'll have to check on that for you, but look it up because John also cut that. And for my money, to see that and see how he is edited Don't Tell Larry, it shows me his grasp of storytelling. And two completely different kinds of films. So that's my hint for you. I'll try and find out if it's streaming or if it's on digital or something. But in the meantime, you can check that out too. But as you hear Greg and John talk, and as I quickly discovered, talking with them, I understand completely how the comedic tone of this dark comedy arose. Greg and John are a barrel of laughs themselves. Don't Tell Larry is the story of Susan, who tells a harmless little white lie about an office party to her truth-obsessed co-worker Larry in order to secure a promotion. It doesn't take long before she finds herself in over her head when tragedy strikes, and all signs point to Larry as being responsible for this tragedy. Terrified her secret will be exposed, Susan ropes in her well-meaning but clueless co-worker and friend Patrick to help cover up her tracks. But every move they make unleashes a whirlwind of chaos. From random drug tests and car explosions to a suspicious detective and a rising body count, Susan's work week spirals into a full-blown clusterfuck. The film stars Patty Guggenheim as Susan, Kenneth Mosley as poor Patrick, Kyle Kennedy as Larry, the veteran Dot Marie Jones as Kim, and Ed Begley Jr. as the also clueless Big Boss Bruce. Begley is hilarious, just drop dead funny. I don't even know where to begin in describing my conversation with Greg and John, though, as not only do we break down every production and casting element, we also touch on potential branding tie-ins for financing a sequel. As you'll hear, we highlight John's editing process, which was extensive, with significant cuts to maintaining pacing and tension. We also talk casting and production challenges, many of which all of you indie filmmakers out there know all too well with those low-budget, micro-budget films. We also hit on Jason and Nolan Livesey's score and its range and impact. The guys also detail, and this is where you don't know whether to laugh or cry, they detail their 21 draft screenplay journey, emphasizing the importance of setup, build, and payoff in crafting a screenplay. They've got some great advice in there as to the trials and tribulations they went through that I think can help a lot of you out there. So you definitely want to take a listen and pay attention to that. And of course, let's not forget the specific casting of Kyle Kennedy, Patty Guggenheim, and Kenneth Mosley. But then there's the visual grammar, which was developed with cinematographer Derek Bauer, as well as the film's color palette, particularly the use of yellow for Larry. Kudos, and I mean that sincerely, kudos to Derek Bauer for a nice visual tonal bandwidth that visually balances fear, terror, and comedy. There's a nice balance there. And you're also going to find out what a pusher and a cracker are. I kid you not. Now, a word of warning to you. You know I don't like spoilers, and I don't ever like to be spoilery, especially when the film hasn't come out. You've still got a few days to go before the film comes out. But once the hilarity ensued, there was no stopping Greg and John in this conversation. So you might hear some spoilery kinds of things as we really dissect the film. Of course, I think they'll probably make you want to see the film even more. So get ready and take a listen to Greg Porper and John Schimke talking Don't Tell Larry. Yes, a film that's funnier than I Love Lucy on crack.
This is John Schimke.
Well, hello, John. It's Debbie, and I just heard another beep, and I'm guessing that's
Debbie.
Greg.
This is Greg. Hello.
Hello. I'm so happy to welcome. I'm so happy to speak with both of you guys about this hilarious film.
Thank you.
But first,
Talk to you too. Speaking with you. Yeah.
First, I have to congratulate you, John, on Somewhere in Montana. You cut that film so beautifully.
You saw that?
I have seen it. I interviewed Brandon. I interviewed Stoddard, and one other. I did a 3-on-1.
Well, I'm glad you liked the edit on that movie. Not a lot of people have seen that movie, but I had fun editing it for sure.
John, it's so beautiful. I mean, number one, Brandon did a great job directing it, and I'm so happy to see he's a consulting producer here on Don't Tell Larry. And you have the same composers that he had on Somewhere in Montana. You've got the Livesies.
Yeah. Jason and Nolan. I convinced Jason and Nolan to score Somewhere in Montana. They're super good friends. They're super good friends of mine. and they were chomping at the bit to score Don't Tell Larry with Greg and I, because they were familiar with the project for such a long time, because Greg and I did it as a web series. And then when Jason and Nolan found out that we were turning it into a movie, they were just like, oh man, we can't wait. We know that's going to be funny.
And for me, what I appreciate is first hearing their work with Somewhere in Montana, a film that has a totally different tone than Don't Tell Larry, and then hearing what they give you guys on Don't Tell Larry. It shows me their range and what they can do.
They are super talented, I have to say. I think, it isn't fair because there's two of them and they're both brilliant. And so, Greg and I are not equally matched. I mean, Greg and I do our best, but if we were in a creative boxing match between Jason and Nolan, and it was Greg and I, Jason and Nolan would KO us really quickly.
Well, now that begs the big question about Don't Tell Larry. I've got to know, between the two of you guys, who's the pusher and who is the cracker?
Greg, what do you say? Who do you want to be?
That's hilarious. I feel like I'm a pusher. I just feel like I am. I feel like this whole time I'm like, all right, we're gonna do this. Let's go, John. Like, John, are we ready for this? Are we gonna do this? Like, let's pick a date. And I feel like you're like, all right, Greg, if this is a date, this is like what we're gonna, have to do, and you just gotta do it. And so you're just gonna crack it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Greg is definitely a pusher, and I'm happy to be the cracker. I'm happy to be the instigator. Like, I feel like I can make a crack in a window, and then I'll let Greg know. I'm like, hey, so I just made this crack. If we could just push somebody through it, and he'd be like, done. And then Greg's ready to push whoever it takes to push. And then Greg's like, he's ready to push whoever through that window to make it happen.
Oh my!
Sure.
That's
what I love about Greg.
That scene, guys, I was laughing my ass off. I went and I rewound and watched it about 5 times because Dot Marie I don't know how she made it through without cracking into laughter. No pun intended. She was fantastic with that whole pusher, cracker, there's got to be a cracker, there's got to be a pusher. Hilarious.
Dot, it was hard. You're right. It was difficult to get through because everything was so funny, but she managed, and she did a fantastic job.
Well, I have to say, this is a testament to the two of you as producers, directors, writers. Your cast is wonderful. Now, I have loved Dot's work forever. She can do comedy. She can do drama. She can do heavy drama like she did with the feature Ragdoll. Wow.
Yeah, she's awesome.
But then you bring in Kyle Kennedy, who is a scream, Ed Begley Jr., who, one look at him and you start laughing.
True.
And then he goes into the Nervous Nelly kind of shtick that he gives to Bruce. And then you partner up Patty Guggenheim and Kenneth Mosley, and then throw Kyle in there so you have the three of them as a perfect triumvirate for insanity. Just exemplary casting here, guys. So I've got to ask you, how did the gods align for you to come up with this casting? Because this film rises and falls on the performances.
Yes, exactly right. I would say, so I need to give, and I know John would say this too, Kyle Kennedy needs to, get his flowers, his accolades, because he's someone who John and I, we were real-life co-workers with Kyle, the three of us. That's how we all met over 10 years ago. And Kyle was a member of the Groundlings, and we were all working at a production company. I was working in development. John was an editor on one of the reality TV shows the company was producing. And Kyle, I think, was like a production coordinator on one of the shows. And just from our conversations, whether it was in the break room of that office or like at a, you know, at a company event where sometimes we go out for drinks, we just spoke with Kyle, and everything Kyle was saying, whether he wanted to be or not, was just funny.
Yeah.
The same way you were saying, like, you look at Ed and you laugh. Just with Kyle, we could not stop laughing. He's just so naturally funny. And yes, he was in the groundlings at the time back then, so it made sense that he was so funny. He has those comedic skills. But John and I, when we linked up, because we both realized we liked making, you know, outrageous comedy content, and then we were both doing it separately at the side, and then we said, why not join forces? We now have this wonderful, I would say, like, Kyle, which is kind of almost like hidden in the shadows working at this production company, when really his true talent is like in front of the camera as this great actor, improviser, writer. And so we had teamed up with Kyle first on a college humor short that I had done, and then after that, John and I wanted to make this web series version of Don't Tell Larry, and it was a series of shorts, and we had Kyle as Larry in that. And that was such a blast. That web series went around to festivals all over the country, and then from there, John and I were like, we need to do something bigger with this. And ultimately, when we landed on we should make a movie version of Don't Tell Larry, the very first thing that was decided on was that, well, Kyle's going to be our Larry. Like, no matter what, like Kyle just has to be the Larry. Like, we wrote that movie for him to play that character. And so that was the first piece that came into play. And then from there, Kyle Kyle didn't even know we were writing a movie until John and I actually had like a draft to put in front of his face like several years after the web series. And he's like, oh, cool, you guys, I didn't know you guys were doing this, because we didn't want to show him something until we had something we were really proud of. And Kyle, like from day one, was like telling us, hey, you need to cast Patty Guggenheim for Susan, because Patty's also in the Groundlings. Patty and Kyle are very close. They've worked together a lot. And Kyle just singing Patty's praises, and, you know, Patty coming on to our movie is because of Kyle as well. And so those two were in place. And then we did have an open, Ricky Madler, our casting director, she sent us a bunch of, you know, tapes that came in for people. And when we saw Kenneth Mosley's tape, he blew us away. He absolutely killed his audition. And the original character of Patrick, I think his little shtick was that sometimes he would do these little raps. And then in Kenneth's audition, he decided to do some singing. And we realized, oh my gosh, he's so talented. And then also we saw how physical he was and just how natural he was with his movements. And just the physical comedy he brought, we're like, oh, this is like what Patrick needs to be. And we kind of retweaked the character of Patrick to fit to Kenneth. And then that's how those three, you know, kind of came together. And then, you know, through Ricky, the script went to Ed, and he loved it. And John and I had to pinch ourselves. And the same thing happened with Dot Marie. Like, when she said, hey, they're reading the script, and hey, they love it. And we're like, are you serious? Like, really? Like, they want to do this movie? And it was just like a no-brainer. So we got really lucky with how that all fell together.
Wow. Well, you know, it's a testament to you guys and good writing. Ed Begley doesn't, you know, do everything that gets handed his way. Dot doesn't get handed everything. She doesn't do everything that gets handed to her. So it's a testament, and to get this type of comedy, to have this type of comedy chops come on board here, and then you've got your other supporting players that are hilarious as well. So you really, but it all starts on the page with your writing and the hilarity of the dialogue and the scenes that you create. Now, granted, I've been in some offices that, I don't know, you might have been flies on the walls looking at some of the stuff happening in those for what you brought to play here. But how did you go about crafting this going down the rabbit hole that starts with Patty? Because it starts with her and wanting that CEO job. And then it's just, this is like I Love Lucy on crack.
Oh my God, I love that.
I grew up watching I Love Lucy. When I was a kid, I had very older parents, and they thought the only TV shows worth watching was like I Love Lucy and The Honeymooners. So I watched so much of that. But you know, Greg and I had a lot of time to develop the screenplay, and when we started, we knew we wanted to start with Susan, with her goal. And the two things we really wanted to do, we wanted to see how we could could ridiculously escalate the conflict. So, and we wanted to start with just a little white lie and see how ridiculously we could escalate it out of control. And then secondly, you know, Greg and I just wanted to write a movie we wanted to see. And when we were sitting there writing, we would do it early in the morning on the phone because we had our day jobs to go to. So it was, you know, between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. every day for years, several years. It felt longer than it was, but it was a while. But you know, if Greg and I weren't laughing, then we knew we needed to do some sort of rewrite. But Greg, how many rewrites did we do?
So we had 21 drafts total. So that included over 10-page one rewrites because, and this is for when people see the movie, and you know this, Debbie, there's a literal cause and effect to everything that happens.
Yes.
So we make one little change on page 2, and now that affects 10 other things we have down the line, and it's just, this whole movie became a puzzle piece, and the thing that we knew we had something good on our hands that was exciting because every time we have to say, shoot, we do need to go back and actually do this page 1 rewrite. It wasn't like daunting. It was like, great, I can't wait to now like change things up to accommodate this tiny little change that we decided, or the way in which she does her first lie. At first, it was intentional. Then it was accidental. We played all the different scenarios of how it would go down, and ultimately we found kind of a way to land it at this, you know, the path that it ultimately took. And, you know, to what John said, yeah, we wanted to start off with that, like one little white lie about a company party to stay true to our web series, actually, because we still loved, that's like how our web series began as well. And there's one other scene, and without spoiling anything, I'll just say it involves 3 people in a supply closet drinking something that no one should be drinking.
Yes.
And that was something that also was in the web series as a small little sketch. And John and I just, at that moment when first of all, it was hilarious to us. Every time, you know, audiences would watch that, they were, you know, it was just absolutely hilarious. So John and I always knew we wanted that particular scene, but just kind of amped up to an 11 in the movie. So we knew that, like, that was a point in our journey we had to get to. So there's a lot of reverse engineering to, well, how are we going to get it to a point where characters are in a closet, possibly drinking what may or may not be pee? And that was like a big part of like how we shaped our Act 1 and like getting into our Act 2A and then 2B and then we knew, and this I won't spoil, but obviously there's some very big plot points that happen near the end of the movie and then at the end of the movie, and those were actually elements that were consistent through all 20 some odd drafts. But the in-between parts, the specifics of Susan's character and her reasons for wanting to be CEO, those always changed. Those weren't always the same. And originally there was a version, I think, where she had a significant like health issue, and she wanted to be CEO, or not to be CEO, excuse me, she wanted to get a raise so she can get money for a health procedure. And that was a whole route we took. And then, you know, ultimately we found our way. But, yeah, I think there's a lot of, like, sitcom background. Obviously, John, you know, you grew up with watching those shows from the 50s, and I also just loved sitcoms from the 80s and 90s. So I think there's a lot of that, like, those set pieces that you see, I think also just come from that, like, passion of, like, sitcom comedy storytelling.
We're a situational comedy, you know, which Larry is. If you like situational comedy, that's what it is. But then what we did is we made it way more ridiculous, a little more violent than any of these things that you can watch from the 50s and the 80s.
Oh, absolutely. But you used
higher stakes.
You used a key word, and you said puzzle, because it truly is a puzzle. If they pay attention to the dialogue and to how you're getting in and out of these hilarious situations, that is so important. Your structure is so important at how you're getting in and out. What's getting them in the supply closet?
Right.
What's getting them out of the supply closet? What's getting Larry's Nana in the building, in a stairwell? You spend a lot of time with the getting us in and out, and that's a puzzle because you play back as further things happen. 5 steps down the road, there might be a reference to what happened 4 steps ago. And that is so
Exactly.
difficult to do. And I'm surprised it only took you 21 drafts of a script to do that.
Well, that is, thank you for saying that. We could have gone longer, but that was, I mean, the amount of, I wish John and I had recorded some of the conversations we had when we were writing this, because as ridiculous as this movie is, there is logic within our heightened story world that, as you just said, Debbie, like actually explains the ridiculousness that happens.
Yeah.
That things that seem completely random and what did they just say is actually something that comes back into play later. Like, it's not just a throwaway line. We wanted to make sure that every single element had, weight to it, and it was a setup for potential, or a build, or then an actual payoff. And yeah, I think honestly, there's probably, 50 drafts mentally, because so much of it was in our head, but
Oh,
what
God.
actually went on the paper when we decided to go in a direction. That's why it's somewhere in that low 20s. I think it is 21, actually.
Yeah, I mean, everything you have is so purposeful. Your entire structure, all of the setups, the jokes, the terror, the fear, it is all very purposefully constructed. And I really appreciate that, because we don't have, it's not like there's a dangling participle somewhere.
Right. I appreciate you, recognizing that.
Yes.
The beauty of the process of writing a screenplay is you have the opportunity to make all those things happen, because you're just sitting there writing. Greg said it perfectly earlier. We were looking at setups, builds, payoffs. That's the map that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when the audience recognizes all those things, it's why talk about modern television. I love the show Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, which Ed Begley Jr. is in those as well. But it's like there's brilliant setup, there's brilliant build, and there's brilliant payoff. Not just in an episode, but even in a whole season. And Greg and I, as we were writing, we were always wanting to set up something, build something, pay something off. And once we got through a draft, we were like, oh, there's a build missing here with the lottery, and where could we do the build? And we were able to look at the story from a bird's eye view and put that in. Because ultimately, when you're writing a script, you're trying to make something entertaining for the audience. And hopefully the goal is that people have the same reaction you did, where you're like, oh my gosh, this thing got set up and built, and you like the payoff, you like the builds.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what makes it fun to watch.
Oh, absolutely. But then once you go beyond the page and these performances, then you have to look at the technical prowess. Derek Bauer is your cinematographer. He does a wonderful job. I first became familiar with his work, it had to be more than a decade ago, with a Christmas movie for Up TV, Naughty or Nice, or Naughty and Nice. So, and it was light, but it had some darkness to it. It's a Christmas movie, on Up TV, you're going to be up. And I've seen a couple other things of his. So to see what he gives you here, you keep your visual tonal bandwidth very light and bright here. Even your night scenes, which I have to say are beautiful. Were you shooting night for night on those?
We were. That was a very difficult aspect of production, is shooting night for night. And especially for Derek, because we were low budget. He's like, I don't have enough lights to shoot night for night. And we're like, well, these are the lights in the truck.
Yep.
Figure it out, So we got very creative, and to Derek's credit, even though he was, every cinematographer is always like, I could have had more lights, but, he did a fantastic job. And we, with everything, with our actors, with their time, and with our crew, just, everybody was stretched paper thin, but everybody gave it their all, including Derek. And to your point, he did a beautiful job in the movie. The movie, as ridiculous as the movie is, the cinematography is almost too good for the story.
It looks
it's great
beautiful.
that we have it. It's, we're very happy.
Those night shoots, though, just stood out for me. And the minute I saw the headlights on the truck, and I'm like, we have no money. We have no money. But the way he shot it and the camera blocking and placement, really, he got some great dutching in there as we're digging and things along that nature that really amped up the scenes. But then again, you've got to look at the visual grammar of the whole film. And what you guys developed working with Derek is fantastic, because so much of the film, it's very close quarters. It's very much a two-shot to a close two-shot on so much of this film. And you're in supply closets. You're in little office cubicles. You're in the corner of a kitchen. So it's tricky, because these are not spacious places. So it's very tricky. So what were your considerations in developing that visual grammar with Derek?
Well, the most important... Go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
No, you can go first. That's all right.
I was going to say, for me, it's very important to, when you're shooting, cinema, the nature of cinema is visual. And so you always have to go in visual first on how you're blocking a scene with actors. And for us, the point of view needed to be strong on Susan's character. So no matter how tight the space was, we knew we wanted to tell the story through Susan's point of view. And so that always dictated where we put the camera. No matter how tight the camera was, we wanted to experience things through Susan's POV.
Right.
And so when you go in that way, and then there were rooms that were literally 10 feet by 10 feet, and we could only put the camera maybe in 2 spaces. But because of that, then, blocking always dictates where you put the camera. So you always focus on what the actors are doing first, and then you place the camera. And so, in the 10 by 10 room, we're like, okay, it makes sense for this scene to be, people standing here, people standing there, movement here, movement there, working with the actors, I feel like I could do this. We need something here. And then when that starts to feel right, then you're like, okay, where can we put the camera? We know we need the camera somewhere over here because there's room, and then adjusting that way. So it was very, Greg and I we found this office early, and Greg and I would always go back into these, before shooting, we would go into the office, and we would go back to the house, and we would go outside, and we would, in ad nauseum, figure out what we could do. Just my niece was there helping for a while, and we have so many photos of blocking of Greg, Hope, me being all these different people. And then finally, when you get there on set, you're like, okay, that doesn't work, and we'll do this. And so you're pivoting and all that. But it's literally blocking dictates shooting, and so you figure out first where your actors are, and then you place your camera. And I don't know, that for me, that's the process of how you just do all that.
And I would love to add to that, John, because I agree with everything you just said. Then on top of all that, right, we said this is okay. We figured out how we're going to do it. And then we were filming in an office with so many floor-to-ceiling windows, or just a lot of windows. And all of a sudden, and Derek a lot of times yeah, but we can't shoot this at this time of day because the sun's coming in and it's going right into the camera. So it's we had to then readjust at the last moment. And we had a lot of times where the light would dictate too. The natural light that was coming in, how we had to shoot the scene, and there's a lot of pictures that had to happen. The scheduling was a big part of it.
Scheduling, planning. If we shoot here, the end of the movie, we know we get sunset coming in through the windows, and so we would be able to schedule okay, end of day, we know the sun's going to be banging through this window, and we got an hour, and we'll do our best to get those shots.
Right. And then when we shot we have his house all planned out, ready to go. We shot, we prepped it, we did the shot list, and then 2 weeks before filming, we found out that the location fell through, and now we have to find a new location, which actually ended up being fantastic, and it's the better location. So everything happens for a reason. However, then all of a sudden we had to redo the process again, completely, from square one. And there's actually multiple locations that fell through at last minute that we had to change. But again, it all worked out, and what I love is that when you see the final product on screen, the trials and tribulations of making an independent film aren't shown in the final product. All of the last minute changes we have to make, all the weather delays, or all of the just behind the scenes chaos that go on in films. Like, I just love that none of that gets, you don't feel any of that in this final product.
No, you really don't. You've got a very polished final product. And, another visual element of this is I love your color palette. And I love the fact that you keep Larry's in yellows. Larry in his members only yellow jacket, Larry in yellow at the end. What were your thoughts on color in this film?
So, yeah, I was going to say, so with color, again, yellow, very important to us. Yellow, and then also there's elements of black in what Larry wears. But obviously that represents like a warning, a hazard. We want to be very particular with the color yellow to signify, a warning, a hazard, something to be especially cautious of. And so that was obviously why we wanted to keep Larry in that yellow palette. And then with our two other leads, with Susan and Patrick, something else was that throughout the week, as things kind of get, spiral more and more out of control, and their characters, go down this darker path, we also try to mirror that as well with the outfits that they're wearing as well. So that was some of our attention just with costuming, and that was working with Summer Moore on that, our costume designer. I thought she, did a fantastic job with, presenting us with options, and, John and I talking this through with her. She presented some really good outfits for the characters to wear, and I think that worked really well.
I love how you've got Susan in a gray pea coat leading into the night sequence, and she's in the shadows, or she's trying to be in the shadows. It's very metaphoric. It works well. Similarly, you've got Patrick coming after her, and he's wearing that dark red turtleneck. So it's darker, not as bright at night, but it's red. It's stop, you dumb bitch. Stop, please.
Listen, I mean, because cinema is a visual medium, color also helps tell your story.
Yep.
And so Greg and I wanted to use color to help, identify like characters subconsciously. I know for me, I always associate the color purple with death. And, Susan wears a lot of purple. Yeah. And, but then we subvert, for me, this is like a personal, I know no one is pointing this out or thinking about it, and I just think it's a subconscious thing. But we subvert the intention behind purple, the color purple for her character. I don't want to give anything away at the end, but, there's that. And you're right, the most sane person in the whole movie is Patrick, and so he wears the color red, because red is a color that points out, it draws a lot of attention to itself, and Patrick is the one who is trying to draw attention to sound judgment.
Which Susan does not have in her desperation. So now...
None whatsoever.
So now I got to come back to Jason and Nolan with the score, because that's the last element that comes into this after John's incredible editing. So let me touch on John's editing first. How challenging was the edit on this one, John? Because you're balancing.
It was the most challenging movie I probably have ever edited, and it was, and it's funny that it's always your own movie that ends up being more challenging.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why is because I think as a filmmaker, you have a movie in your head that you're trying to make, and then when you go execute in production, you're never getting the movie that you make. You're probably, that is in your head, maybe you get like 1% or 2% of that. And so a lot of it is just like creatively making things work, because there's a lot of things in the footage where something went wrong, or this didn't happen, or wasn't ideal or whatever. So a lot of times you're just trying to cover things up, or you're trying to, make something be more than maybe what it was. And so, and I think for us too, because we had such great talent, Greg and I had a lot of options to choose from in takes in terms of, what we had, because we would always, we were limited to how many takes we could do per shot. And so we strategically had different moments where we would do the script, and then because we had such talented improv actors, we would ask them to improv some options. And usually, it was great to get those during setups, and it was great to get those during, like, escalating conflict moments in the scenes where they were escalating conflict. And that gave us a lot of options to shape the movie. I firmly believe that, you don't make anything. Cinema happens when you're editing. That's where you truly find cinematic moments. That's how you put it together. It's the only thing that makes cinema different than any other art form is the editing process. And so you can do so much in it. And so for us, we were trying to make scenes as funny as possible, and then put the pressure, escalate, and make it the conflict as high as possible as well through the editing process. And it was challenging. But we did it. I think, I don't know, Greg did it. I think the editing process was like 3 or 4 months we cut this movie.
It was a while. So John cut this. So in John's apartment, John's setup was at the kitchen table, and then I was working at a snack table next to him on my computer, also going through footage. We were both working in Avid. I'm pulling different selects for moments while John's working on the intricate, edit of the scene. And there was a lot of, we had a version that was like the pure script version, and then we had a cut that I think was like 2+ hours. And we realized this movie does not need to be 2 hours.
It does not deserve
a solid 90 minutes. But the thing was, there were scenes and jokes and moments that we both loved, that in test screenings, people are laughing their butts off. We are loving it. There are some jokes that I just love so much. And they ended up getting cut because ultimately we wanted to keep that 90 minutes. And ultimately, if we, people are saying, let's get into the action a little sooner. All right, that means that there's a scene that, yes, it's funny, it adds a little bit, but it works without it. And if you weren't on set and you didn't know that scene existed, you're not going to miss it. And so, it was hard sometimes to let go of those moments, but ultimately it's what served the movie best. I think out of our first 10 scenes that were filmed, only 3 of them ended up in the final cut.
Wow.
And and then there was a whole sequence of Susan going into the building and trying to go into opening the door for someone, and then the door being closed on her, and then trying to get into the, elevator and going up. And again, standard stuff. But I just think that ultimately it's having to be really smart about what ultimately stays in there and making sure that we are being as economical as possible with the story we tell. And we don't want a movie that's 2 hours, even if that means an extra 20 minutes of things that are funny, because then it's going to take away from the tension and the importance of the escalation that we establish.
And you're going to lose the audience. In today's world, they don't want to stick around for 2 hours anymore.
Not if it doesn't hold their attention.
Yeah.
For me, I love watching movies. That's why I do this. I love watching movies so much. And so when I'm editing, I'm just trying to put something together that I want to watch. Ultimately, that's what I'm doing. And when you do that, you're just getting rid of the stuff that you just don't want to see or doesn't work or, whatever that is. And, for Larry, there's 3 movies. There's the movie and the script, and then when you're in production, there's a movie you're making that you think you're going to put together, and then ultimately the real movie you're editing, you're discovering is when you're editing, and that movie is like reminiscent of maybe what the script is, and it's reminiscent of the movie you're making in production, but actually making is the movie and the edit. And there's like a million ways you can edit a movie.
Sure.
And you have to decide which one you are going to actually make, the one you're discovering. The way I always look at it, though, even though there's like a million options, I'm always like, what does the movie want to be as well? And so I try to let the footage tell me what it wants to be, what the movie wants to be, because sometimes I feel like I can try to force something into an edit that I really wanted to work, like to what Greg was saying, like, oh, we had a joke or we had a scene that we thought was funny because we were gut busting laughing when we were in production, but the movie is like, I don't want this, I don't need this, I don't want this, and you got to listen to that. And it's a process, it does take a long time, but that's what I love about it, because you're just discovering, you're discovering what the movie is.
Mm-hmm.
Creativity is something I think a lot of times you don't create. It's something you discover, or it's something that's like, that just comes to you. And so really you get the opportunity sitting there editing for 3 months, and you let things come to you and get inspired on what you're editing. It's no different than writing.
Yeah.
And when Greg and I were sitting there finishing the cut on the movie, Greg and I wrote the movie together, and we were laughing as we were developing this thing. And then once again, Greg and I were together at the very end trying to get our 2-hour cut down to, a reasonable 90 minutes. And it was the same thing where we were just like laughing at like how ridiculous and fun this movie is. Ultimately, at the end, we achieved our goal of like making a movie we wanted to see that we ourselves, found entertaining. And so we're excited for other people to watch it and hopefully be entertained as well.
Oh, trust me, they will definitely be entertained with Don't Tell Larry. It's entertaining from beginning to end. I've got to ask you about the score, about the music. At what point did you bring Jason and Nolan in to create a score for you, and what were you looking for musically?
That was at the beginning. Oh,
when we lost it, is when they came in.
Right.
Are you going to talk about music?
Yeah, that's funny. Yes, I was going to say at the beginning we were going back and forth, but actually the original temp score was a lot of White Lotus season 1 music. that kind of came in, and it's I don't know. I think like John when we had initially talked. I don't like using temp music part. But there were some sensibilities there. I think that also was there some. Yeah, they definitely helped shape it. I think these guys, they just had I think when they were putting together themes, like they had a few select themes that when they just watched the movie, that just came to them and they pitched it to us once we had a lock cut, and we kind of ran with their initial melodies. Like I don't think there was any change in like melody that they pitched us, like right, John, like from the very beginning.
No, why would we change that? It's almost like Steven Spielberg going in and listening to John Williams show him the Jaws score. Like, what are we gonna do? No, don't do it like that. But to Greg's point, though, it's really interesting because we used a lot of temp music that kind of had the vibe that we thought that was helping us cut the movie together with pacing and things like that. But when we locked the movie, we weren't going to make any changes to the edit. We gave it to Jason and Nolan, and when they watched it, they were watching the movie for the first time, and then they were helping us tell our story because they got their first reactions of like, oh, this is really funny, this is really good, this part is here, this part is that. And then they send us music, and in a way, it's almost like they're helping us tell our story better. And it's almost like your movie needs to feel like this. Your movie needs to sound like this. And ultimately, because they got the movie, they understood what Greg and I were trying to do. To Greg's point, the notes from us were very minimal. It was like, oh my God, that's great. And if we needed something longer or we don't need music here, I mean, for us, I think it ultimately ended up being like we ended up taking some music out because we discovered later on that actually there were some moments that didn't need music. The absence of music was actually helping the scene be stronger and made the other scenes with music be more impactful. But, you know, for them, it's always like we're talking about intention, emotion, and at the same time, too, we were like, this movie is about Susan and her point of view, and they were writing the music the same way, thinking about Susan's point of view. The music was experiencing, you know, that. Even though there's a Larry theme, there's I'm Just a Raisin theme, there's all the different themes and stuff cinematically that we absolutely wanted. We wanted a traditional score that would be something like, you know, John Williams or Thomas Newman, but also our movie, because it's this dark comedy and it's quirky and can be twisted, there needed to be something off about the music, and so they were able to embrace that as well. The one thing that, you know, you watch the movie, but I think the one thing that's really interesting is I think what got inspired probably from the White Lotus music that we had as temp is Nolan recorded his own voice going like, bah, boo, ba, da, ba, you know, and so they built this instrument that just plays samples of their voice doing all these little vocals, boops and bops, or jazz scats, whatever. I'm not that much of a musical person, but that's what I'm calling them. and that gave it the texture and the tone of like really what matched the offbeat, you know, off-kilter world that we were building for Don't Tell Larry. And that was something we would have never come up with on our own, and that was their genius that came up with that.
And that's a great point, John, I wanted to mention too. It's not just that they sang, like they did the vocals, but he singly like recorded each sound that he made and associated with the notes. So, and that like almost more like staccato feel is different than him just like fluidly singing those notes of those vocals. Like when he explained that to us, like there is a difference in that texture that I think just like made it feel even more kind of like quirky and offbeat, but like in just such a great way.
All the pieces fit together so nicely in this package. Don't Tell Larry is so much fun. Like I said, it's like I Love Lucy on crack. But
might have to use that, Debbie.
You can. Yeah. Feel free. Because I Love Lucy.
I've never heard anyone describe it that way, and that is the best description I've ever heard.
You watch the setups that you have. You watch the scenarios that you have Susan getting into. And poor Patrick is the reluctant co-conspirator. He's Ethel to Susan's Lucy. And it's always
Ricky.
Yeah, it just hilarious. I love it. I hope there's a sequel.
With the right getting the funding for it, and we're ready to go.
if everybody makes it a success, you know, the audience, there could be another one, of course, but
100%.
Ultimately these things are dependent on, you know, an audience. If we can capture an audience, we would love to expand the world of Don't Tell Larry. I mean, and you know, Greg and I, we when we've talked about what to do for the second one, we would just pick up right where we left off.
That's what I would do. But, you know, to get your funding, I would go talk to, you know, the people that own Sun-Made Raisins. Raisins is so integral in Larry's persona. Maybe the raisin companies will want to pony up some money for you.
I love that idea.
It's a fantastic idea, and believe it or not, we've already been talking with them.
Oh, my God.
So, funny story there. To the right place.
And go hit up Eberhard Faber or a pencil company, because you can't have raisins without pencils to stick in them.
Exactly.
So-
Exactly. You got it.
We want to repack. We want to rebrand like a new packaging where you get a box of raisins with a pack of pencils. It's all together. It's just one thing you grab off the shelf. You buy it, you get in your car, and you enjoy.
Your hands don't get sticky. It's a win-win. I don't see the down.
And it'd be perfect swag at film festivals too.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, everything branded. Don't tell Larry. Guys,
We're working on that's a big part of our outreach. So yeah, we do believe there's a brand behind this movie. It's not just a movie, but we do think it's a brand.
you need t-shirts done in yellow and black. You need raisins and pencils.
We should send you one.
But guys, this has been so much fun getting to talk with you about Don't Tell Larry. I can't wait for everybody to get to see this one, because I will have to watch it many more times, I assure you, because it just makes me laugh from beginning to end. I can't wait to see what you do next, and if you bring me a sequel.
We had a great time talking to you, and we would love to be back talking about a sequel in the future.
I will talk to you guys about any film you want to talk about. Even if you do something other than a Don't Tell Larry 2, or I said Don't Tell Larry, you didn't listen. I will talk to you about anything that your creative minds come up with, guys.
Well, thank you, Debbie.
Sounds great. It's such a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And that was Greg Porper and John Schimke going in-depth on the making of Don't Tell Larry. And Don't Tell Larry, as I said, it's another film in theaters this Friday, June 20th. But it is also available on demand on Friday as well. So there's no excuse not to see Don't Tell Larry. You don't even have to leave the comfort of your couch. So that is all the time we have this week. I'll be back next week with more entertaining and hopefully entertaining and enlightening interviews for you. But in the meantime, don't forget to check out BehindTheLensOnline.net, as well as our YouTube channel, which is on YouTube at Behind the Lens Online. So until next week, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens.